Today's show is going to be a great one. We're talking with Olympic gold medalist and co-founder of SwimSwam, Mel Stewart. He's got some great wisdom for us and his view of the Dean Farris phenomenon. And if you're enjoying our podcast, we would be so grateful if you would subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, or Spotify. And if you leave us a review, you may be featured in our review of the month. Thanks for listening.
Welcome to Champions Mojo Weekly Podcast with your hosts, Kelly Pallas and Maria Parker. You'll hear authentic, entertaining stories with tips, lessons, and wisdom from champions to inspire, motivate, and educate you. You'll get the tools you need for becoming a true champion in your own life. And now, your host, Kelly Pallas.
Hello, friends. Welcome to Champions Mojo Podcast, where I am co-hosting with Maria Parker. Hey, Maria, how are you today?
I'm doing great today, Kelly. Thanks. Looking forward to this.
Well, Maria, I am so excited today that we are going to talk to Mel Stewart, a 1992 Olympic gold medalist in the 200-meter butterfly and the co-founder of SwimSwam, the hottest swim news outlet on the planet. SwimSwam, which you can find at swimswam.com, has taken the world by storm, and after only 7 years, it is the go-to place for all swimming news. And I have to admit that I am addicted to SwimSwam. I go to it about 10 times a day, so I'm loving this. Besides hearing about how this amazing business came to launch and some of its operations, we're going to get Mel to answer the Dean Farris phenomenon question, and we're also going to get some wisdom from Mel on enjoying this process and what he does for mental health and how we can be champions in our own lives. And all this will be on our road trip segment.
I'm looking forward to this very much, Kelly. I've listened to Mel's whole interview and he is amazing. Before we launch the road trip interview, I'd like to give our listeners a little bit more background on Mel Stewart. Besides being an Olympic gold medalist, Mel was a world, American, and NCAA record holder and has been an innovator from way back. He was a pioneer in becoming a professional swimmer back in 1991 when he turned pro after his junior year of college at the University of Tennessee. Mel has also worked as an Olympic analyst for ABC, NBC, ESPN, Fox Sports, and TBS. Mel has obviously figured out how to be a champion and successful businessman, and he has some very interesting perspectives on what it takes to get there and what keeps him passionate. I found some real pearls of wisdom in his conversation.
Thanks, Maria. So, Maria, after we hear the road trip segment, let's reconvene and share with one another our favorite takeaways from Mel's interview. But before we go there, a note that this interview took place when I was able to sit down with Mel in Austin, Texas during the Women's NCAA Division I Swimming and Diving Championship. So you may hear the announcer in the background a little bit, but not much. So enjoy the interview.
And now it's time for the road trip segment.
Welcome to the show, Mel. We're so glad to have you.
Welcome. I'm so glad to be here. I've heard so much about it.
How did you get into swimming?
Gastonia, North Carolina. I was the second sibling in my family, so my sister went in. She was 18 months older, and she took to the water. She loved the water. She had no problem putting her head underwater. And the lady who taught me to swim was Charlotte Whiteside, Gastonia YMCA, and I was the kid you had to pry the fingers off the railing, and I was resistant to go underwater. But Charlotte Whiteside taught me to swim. I was 3 years old.
How did you first feel about swimming?
I don't remember. I remember a fear, but I don't know if memories are faulty. So you don't know if your memory is something that your parents gave you or if it's real. I only know that they tell me that I was afraid, and I seem to remember being afraid. But I don't remember going from lessons to the swim team, because I was on the swim team before I turned 5. I was going to swimming practices because my sister was at swimming practices. And so there's no break in my life. From my earliest memory, I was always in the water.
Do you have any stories about identifying as a swimmer in those early days?
Well, I think the identity I took was that I'm a coach. because I was too little so that I could swim at the YMCA because I was going through their lessons program, and then there was a bridge to their YMCA club team, the year-round team. The summer league team was where it was at, and I wanted to be on that team, and I was too little. So the coach let me walk up and down the pool deck with him. So my sister would go to practice, and I would walk up and down the pool deck and follow the coach. And I wore a whistle, and apparently I was so small this whistle hung to about my knees. And I remember that. I remember walking on that pool deck and thinking, I'm giving these people their work. And this is good. And they need to listen to me.
How did the nickname Gold Medal Mel begin?
It started when I was a kid. So there's two stories to this, and I don't want to confuse people.
Yes.
So Gold Medal Mel Pender was a track and field athlete, and my father was somebody who would always watch the Olympic Games, and he was an Olympian in the 64, 68, and my dad remembered that name. So when I started swimming and I started to show some promise, he called me Gold Medal Mel. But it was just my dad, and it was a personal thing. So it never went beyond that. And years later, I'd won gold medals, and then I went to another career, and then came back to swimming and decided to start a business. And that came with the rise of the internet, and the internet is a means of communication that could be deemed a media outlet. I told my wife, I said, I'm going to test a brand. I'm going to test a brand from childhood because I think it's webby. I think it might work. And I told her, and she's like, that's a little bit weird. And I said, I don't want to have to reintroduce myself to the market. I just want it to be in my name, and I think it'll work. And within 6 months, people were saying Gold Medal Mel as my name for my entire career. Like, it was like I became Gold Medal Mel at such and such an age. And so it was a little bit smoke and mirrors.
What role do you think the positive connotation of being called Gold Medal Mel as a young child actually had in your becoming an Olympic gold medalist?
My mother always told me that I was destined for great things. Always. And I do think that matters. I think parents do that oftentimes, but my mother was very specific about it. My father, not as much, but my mother was so specific that she would put a piece of paper down and create a war plan. This is how you're going to do it. And to be clear about that, she'd put a piece of paper down in the middle of a circle. She'd put your goal. She would draw lines out from that circle. And on every line, it would be how you're going to make it to the inside of that circle. And that could be for swimming, that could be for grades, that could be for anything. But mostly it was focused on swimming.
Let's jump to SwimSwam, the cutting-edge online everything swimming news website that has taken the world by storm. Mel, tell us about SwimSwam.
This is a long story to answer your question. Going into the Olympic Games, I left school my junior year. I still continued to go to school, but I gave up my NCAA eligibility and turned pro. There was no internet, but I knew that I was going to do it differently, so I hired a Hollywood PR firm, Wilkinson, House & Much, and paid them nearly a third of everything that I was earning through my swimwear contracts and my endorsement dollars. And they did nothing but say, this is who you are, this is your story, this is your narrative, here are the images, let's build out your image database. And they pushed swimming as a business for me personally. And I knew it was a smart move. I didn't know what it would net. And it worked out very well. There were some moments that were, Sports Illustrated, being in Rolling Stone, a lot of television interviews, a lot of network TV interviews. It really paid off. And so I felt like that experience was a learning experience, and it connected to swimming.
So, Mel, you were truly one of the pioneers of being a professional swimmer, celebrity swimmer role model. What other media connections helped in giving you a firm foundation for co-founding SwimSwam?
Into the 90s, I worked for ESPN. I hosted a show called American Outback, and I started to do the commentary for NBC for the NC2As. Rowdy had done it; they gave it to me, and I wanted the NBC contract. And there were just a handful of people who could get it. Rowdy got it, and when he got it, I thought to myself, if there's no internet at this time in history, if that's not something I'm going to do, and he's under contract and it's for a while, I need to do something else. And I left the sport, and as the internet evolved, I saw an opportunity to come back and have a voice, and I thought to myself, okay, you're not going to be the NBC analyst. You can move into the internet world.
How did the concept of moving into the internet world with SwimSwam come about, and did you worry about competition?
That was a slow burn, and it's not something that I rushed into. There's a long process for it, but I would say that the biggest reason why I finally made the move was that my wife had started saying, you need to do this, you need to do this. And she talked to me for about 2 years. You need to move and take advantage of this market, because it wasn't evolved. We only had, every swimmer knows, if you're in the swimming market, that there was one news source, and that was Swimming World Magazine, that reported 365 days a year. And they hadn't had any competition, and they hadn't evolved. They had built a great business, and they were a great voice in the sport, but they weren't current with the times and taking advantage of the latest technology. So we finally entered the market in 2012. And when we did, we had a huge advantage over Swimming World. So we were coming into a market that was a monopoly. And so it was, everyone was ready for something new, but we stepped in and we didn't have old technologies that we were working from, which they did. They were working from old technologies and old platforms. We started brand new, and when you do that, cost is very low, your team can be very small, and you can move fast. And if your mission statement and your policies are to always embrace new technology, you're going to move it at light speed. And that was nearly 7 years ago. And it has been moving very fast.
What advice would you give to those starting up a business?
I think the most important thing is to understand who you are as a manager and who you are, how you fit on the team. My wife pushed for 2 years to do this. And then when we started, we had talked about it so much, we knew what our skill sets were. And I am like a Rowdy Gaines. I am like a CEO of a business who has ideas and entrepreneurial ideas and is full of enthusiasm and wants to move forward. But in terms of operations, I'm better than most, but it's not my skill set.
What were some of the immediate areas of operations that SwimSwam needed to launch, and who filled those key positions?
So we knew we needed operations. We knew we needed that skill. We knew we needed a strong finance and legal arm, and we systematically found those people. Tiffany my wife's had 3 businesses. She's launched 3 successful businesses. She is, in effect, our CFO. She handles all of HR. And she's just high performing. She started in the entertainment industry, went through the William Morris training program, which is now William Morris Endeavor. She's a graduate of USC. I'm a salesman. I know how to sell. I know how to brand, and I know how to produce media. So I've stayed in my corner and managed my side of the business, which is that, managing the brand, managing the design, managing photographs, managing video production, and managing all of sales. When it comes to the editorial management, we have someone who is just hard driving and a general. That's Braden Keith, co-founder, owner. And that served us really well. But I don't try to step into their responsibilities. I don't have that skill set. And I think knowing what your talent is and knowing what it's not is extraordinarily important.
Is this a full-time endeavor for you?
SwimSwam for us is anywhere from, an easy week is 40 hours. A hard week is 100 hours. So the reason why is that swimming never sleeps. There are swimming meets every weekend of the year except for the Christmas holidays or the end of the year holidays. So there's always a competition, and you can argue that there are meets, there's ice swims that happen during those days.
I love that. Swimming never sleeps. Can you dig deeper on that?
We just had a get-together with our peers today, with all of our, Olympic alumni and our national team alumni. We all came together and we fellowshipped, and we heard from the chief operating officer of USA Swimming, Mike Unger, and he was outlining to all these insiders with deep knowledge on the sport that there are 5 international swimming meets this summer. They're going to take over a 6-week window of time. Leading up to that, there's going to be pro-ams and pro-swims and massive invitationals with 2,000 swimmers. Swimming never sleeps, and we never sleep. We report in 6 languages. We have teams who report through the night. And if you're in an internet business, if you're a digital company, you have to be that way. You have to keep building out your footprint.
So what is your daily schedule like?
We like the 40-hour work weeks, but we can't always have that. That isn't the perfect world in swimming. Sometimes you're working 21 days straight. When things are moving well and life is good, the routine is pretty simple for me. I'm waking up at 6:45, and I drive and I get a cup of coffee and I get a cup of tea and I get a croissant from my wife. I come back and she eats her croissant and tea in bed, and we spend about 30 minutes together just talking and just being with each other. And I try to keep that as sacred as possible, because that's our time just to be together. We've been married 20 years. We're connected. I really like having that kind of support in my life and the intimacy, because I feel like I can go out and just take on the world. So beyond that personal time, the next 30 minutes to an hour, I'm trying to consume news. And it's just the world at large. If I'm reading anything, I might try to read through an extra chapter of a book. But I'm basically just getting my brain warmed up to get started. Once the day begins, it begins very quickly, and the reason why is we have so many advertising partners. With SwimSwam, I'm managing all the deliverables for these partnerships. They start coming in, and they start coming in fast, because typically they want more, or they're unhappy with something that has not been executed the way they thought it should be executed. And that takes up 3 to 4 hours of my morning, and that is folded into the news cycle of the morning. And the news cycle of the morning in swimming is the most robust. It is intense. It is an intense period of time when most of the manufacturing and delivery happens. It happens 24/7, but most people consume their news, and traffic is highest on the web in the morning when you're pushing it out. And there's a reason why morning TV shows are so successful. There's a reason why you wake up and you're reading the news. It's the news of the day. And that news you get in the morning oftentimes will be the news that you're reading maybe in a slight variation the next day, sometimes into the third day, because of the news cycle. By the afternoon, I'm following up with people that I'm trying to build new relationships with. So, morning is wife, get a little bit of news, get warmed up. Then it's news manufacturing, deliverables for our advertising partners. And then by the afternoon, when people are relaxed, I'm reaching out and I'm trying to build new relationships.
What do you do to relax and de-stress?
I've been doing yoga since my 20s. I felt that yoga was the one thing that I could do that gave me the high, like swimming, without being in the water. So in my best years, I'm doing half of my workout is yoga, half of my workout is swimming. Some years, it's just yoga. But it's the one thing that keeps my brain functioning correctly, keeps it sharp.
What skills can you say you took from your athletic career and applied to being a very successful businessman?
I think swimming, I can only look through the lens of swimming, and I feel, I don't want to feel like, I don't want to look like a person or sound like a person who's too myopic, even though I am. So I imagine this is effective for someone else, but I can only speak from my experience. Swimming's brutal. especially our generation, growing up in the 70s and into the 80s, we were doing 100,000 meters a week. I was a miler, mid-distance freestyle, 200 butterfly, could crack off a 400 IM just because I was just fit. But what swimming taught me was resilience. It taught me that if I wanted to compete with someone, I knew that people eventually would give up. So I could find little teeny areas where I wanted to achieve mastery and wanted to be the best in, and I could start just leaning on it, nudging on it, opening up space there, creating something new there. And if I was consistent enough, competitors would give up, ultimately. And there's a moment when they do and you feel a release, and it's like, now you own it. So in terms of business, swimming has just provided that ability to be resilient to the point that it's almost like a monk-like existence.
Beautiful.
It makes you bulletproof. And here's the thing. If you're not successful, you're not number one, who cares? Because that process can get you to number 2 or number 3. And at that level, you have a livelihood. And that's the wonderful thing about your life, after sports, is that you don't have to win gold. You don't have to be the absolute best. But you can apply those skills to get there.
What are your thoughts on mindset?
I grew up in a traumatic, dysfunctional situation. So I knew that I put all of my stuff in the pool, all my stress, all the things that I was experiencing, all the bad stuff. I worked it out in the water. When the career was over, all of that stuff that I'd been managing with swimming came rushing back. And when it did, I was trying to manage it other ways that weren't necessarily healthy. But something that I did use that got me balanced out was I started going to therapy. And a lot of people didn't start it until late in life, but I started in my 20s. And not hardcore. Then I got married, and then 3 years into the marriage, stuff started to resurface again. And it was like my marriage would be over if I didn't take care of this. So I went in and started managing it again. And I've never stopped. So for me, it's always about beating back those voices in your head, all the negativity, all the things that you've carried with you from your family and your childhood that's holding you back. It's been managing that, getting past that. That's the secret sauce. If you're not working on yourself, then you're hurt. You're limping around. You want to arrive in the room, in the conference, at business, as fearless as you can possibly be.
What keeps Mel Stewart going to the next great accomplishment?
I don't know that anyone. This is a problem, and this is a problem that I have, and here's my confession to you, confession to anyone, is that and I think a lot of swimmers do this, I don't know if everyone does it, I don't celebrate successes very much, and certainly don't do it enough, and not at the right level. Failed there. And people need to celebrate success, because I'm someone who will achieve something and it will feel like, oh, that was just prophesied earlier with all the hard work and with the discipline with the process. And normal people need to experience success and celebrate that. I haven't. And I think the reason why I've been able to have success in a few different areas and throughout a lifetime is because I'm not in love with the success, even though it sounds like that's what it's all about. I love the process. If you can learn to love that late January into February period of time when you're deep in the numbness of training and you just know deep in your heart, I'm doing the right thing, and you're quiet and just living that lifestyle, if that's your love, you're going to be successful at everything, because I love that about the business or whatever venture that I'm in. I'm always trying to find, okay, where's the process I'm going to live in this space, and this is going to carry me through to success. That might sound crazy. I don't know. But I hardly ever think about the success.
Talk to me about your passion.
I think passion used to be that I'm not good enough and I need to be loved, and I'm trying to attain that through some sort of achievement or some sort of a place. And it took a long time to get through that. I started coming out of that as a teenager, in college, and as an early adult, and then as an adult. That's always been a journey. For me, passion is where can I accept responsibility and take on something where I have value, and if I can live in that space, and that usually starts with the process, going to a certain niche and building out a process, because I'm looking in the distance for success, but I'm trying to take on that responsibility. I'm trying to create it and make value out of it, and then happiness and pride and this wonderful positive feeling is sort of the chaff that floats up, and it's the dust that comes up, and I'm inhaling it. And so I live in process.
What legacy do you want to leave?
I want people to live with me inside this concept of swimming is in this body of water that covers 3/4 of our planet, and everyone should swim, everyone should appreciate it, and everyone should know who's the best at it, or who's proficient at it, or who's been teaching kids their entire life. I think that for me, it all goes back to childhood, and even in the Olympic years when I wanted swimming to be the greatest thing that's ever been. And I had a question: how big is the audience, and how many people can be so engaged and informed about what this thing that we do that they'll be passionate about it? So I'm trying to find how large the audience is and how far we can nudge that audience. That makes me passionate. That's a very convoluted response, but I want to know where the ceiling is. And if there's the ceiling, I'm going to break it, I'm going to past it. And so I want people to really love the sport and love it in a way where they respect it as a life-saving skill, or they respect it as a labor of love in terms of what you're doing as an athlete, or maybe for physical fitness, or maybe you're a coach. I want people to love water if they're in flotation tanks, sensory deprivation tanks, and they go in there to change their brain chemistry. I want people to love water. I want them to come to SwimSwam to love it. I had to give you one plug.
No, I love it. What do you think people need to be doing to be the champion in their own lives?
I think that if you're not doing three things, it's really two things. I think that people need to exercise for their brain. And I think that you're trying to find things that are going to change your brain chemistry, and it might be running, it could be swimming, it could be yoga. But I think that you have to keep your brain fit. And you do that by moving your body, because your mind and your body are connected. I also think that therapy or group or connection to other people doesn't have to be going to a therapist. Maybe it's a sense of community. I think that you need connection with people, and you need to hold space, be connected. You need to forget about yourself sometimes and do something outside of yourself for your brain. Because I do think the secret sauce, the elixir, the secret power, the magic.
The mojo. I have to make the plug of the mojo. The
mojo is open head. Keep your head open. Keep it open to all the ideas, to move all the stuff and the gunk out. Keep your head open. Make space for the creativity.
So Mel, tell me about this Dean Farris phenomenon on SwimSwam. Every time an article is posted that references Dean or is about Dean, the comment section on SwimSwam is full of positive, glowing comments, buoying Dean up. So what is going on with Dean Farris?
I'm going to try to explain this as best I can. Our editorial team
Frankly, I had to ask them at a certain point, what is going on with Dean Farris? What is with this Dean Farris phenomenon on SwimSwam? And a few of our experts informed me. It seems to go back to this. Dean probably could have gone to school anywhere he liked, and I think that the way most of our readers see it is that he chose his education first. He chose to go to Harvard, and that was a big risk because he was a huge talent. And there's only a handful of programs where people traditionally go, and then move on to be Olympic athletes if they have that potential, which clearly Dean was an Olympic hopeful. He had promised. So in the comments section, whenever we would report on Dean would show a little bit of success. It would be very impressive, but it was the comments were just overwhelmingly glowing. And he was, but his freshman year, he had this massive jump. This freshman year, he had this huge leap forward, and suddenly he was on everyone's radar. And no one gets more excited about new talent than swimming fans. Swimming fans go nuts over him. That's a big part of the reason why we see so much traffic from junior level swimmers. We start reporting on kids who are breaking national age group records at 9, 10, 11, and 12. We report some state records, and our audience loves it. We love to see talent emerging, and we try to capture their narrative early in their career. So freshman year, he makes this big leap, and at a certain point, the comments were so glowing that everyone started to make fun of the people making glowing comments. They were just they just started making, when a Dean article would go up, people would just suddenly say, Dean is the god of swimming. Dean is the Michael Jordan of swim. Michael Phelps is great, but he's not as good as Dean Farris. And it became such a thing that at a certain point, I met his parents. I met him at national championships in Irvine last summer. And they asked me about it. And I had to explain to them that he was like this SwimSwam meme. He was this SwimSwam internet thing. And and they were kind of conflicted about it. And I assured them that, it's based in truth too, because there is the hope that he is going to perform and go on to be potentially an Olympian and potentially an Olympic champion. And that was real. That became real his freshman year, and it has become more and more so over the years. So we anticipated a great NC2A championships from him this past weekend. He shot out of the cannon on the 4x200 freestyle relay, and he led off in a 1:29.15, which is extraordinary. I think Michael Phelps, his best time was a 1:31 200-yard free, or 1:30 200 free. Yeah, it's somewhere in that range. So it was just incredibly fast, and it was. We kind of anticipated that our traffic at NC2As this year would be lower. We anticipated the audience not being there the way it was in 2018. Back in 2018, Caleb Dressel had perhaps it was the greatest NCAA championship performance of all time. He went 17.6 in the 50 free, 39.9 in the 100-yard freestyle, and 42.8 in the 100-yard butterfly. And it was such a phenomenal performance that everyone there started doing the Gator Chomp. So every team, all the fans, they honored him, and that's very unusual because it's highly competitive. And we were all kind of scratching our heads, going, "This is unreal." Dean's 1:29.15 in the 4x200 relay, that leadoff swim, was in that ballpark. That's the same type of phenomenal race. Of course, he followed up with a 40.8 in the 100-yard free. That was on the last day. On the second day, what was interesting, we call it the third day of competition because we have that weird Wednesday, which is just the relay. in the middle of all that, he went a 43.6 in the 100-yard backstroke. What's interesting about that is the NC2A, the American record, is held by Ryan Murphy, who's a 3-time Olympic gold medalist in 2016 in the backstroke, 100 back, 200 back, 4x100 medley relay. He was in the stands cheering for Cal, and he witnessed this guy go a 43.6, and his American record is a 43.4. And the next day, he was at a social with about 50 Olympians. These are alumni, and we get together at NC2As, and we break bread, and we talk about war stories. And we have guests, and Ryan Murphy was our guest. And Ryan, the first question was, "Hey, buddy, what was it like seeing Dean Farris rattle your record?" And it made him nervous. And it's interesting how competitive swimming is and how tight we are. And let's just say that Dean is going to be a very, very big story on the run-up to the 2020 Olympic trials in Omaha next year.
Do you think that the over-the-top fandom and positive energy that Dean gets from the SwimSwam commenters may have helped him in some way, energetically, vibrationally?
I think if you asked anybody about this, I think 90% of the folks would say no. He's his own man. He stands up. He's a Harvard guy. He's an intelligent person. He's very focused. He's into his process. If you're talking to me, or you're talking to weird cats who think in a very unusual way, I'm a bit of a child, and I think magically, and I frankly do believe in. I think that when you have a thought, your thought is energy. I think when that energy is positive, I think it goes into if you're into Jungian theory, I think it goes into the field, and I think it bounces back and reverberates back. So I'm in the minority, and my answer is, I think the answer is absolutely yes.
And that is the answer I was looking for, Mel, because I'm part of that 10% that believes that the positive energy goes out into the universe and can change matter. So maybe the commenters on SwimSwam have helped Dean Farris's success in some way. I know that when I was reading those comments during the NCAAs after he set his American record and then won 2 NCAA titles, the commenters were saying, did we help create Dean Farris's success? So very cool, and it is going to be exciting to watch Dean over these next couple of years. Mel, it has been an honor and a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and I'm going to be very upset if I'm not back on your show over and over again.
Wow, Kelly, that was a great interview. What an inspiring guy. I got so much out of that. There were so many pearls, but one of the sections I really loved was when he talked about, as an endurance swimmer, just knowing that if he just kept going and just kept persisting, talk about grit. I mean, if he just kept persisting, then the competitors would eventually crack and fall away, and he would win. And I really identified with that, because I think as an endurance athlete myself, that's been what I've done. I've just said, okay, I'm not going to worry about what's going on in the race at this particular moment, but I know that if I keep on going, this is a long race, something's going to happen. So I loved his attitude about that. And he also, I loved his insight about himself and what he was good at. He talked about process, and that he's good at process, and he's trying to really enjoy, what he's doing, what he's creating. And the third thing that I really identified with is, he said, I don't look enough at my successes. I think you asked him a question about success, and he said, I don't even look at that. Then he said, and we should. And I think he's right. I think that when we look at our successes and we remember our successes, they give us confidence moving forward. So I just loved it. What was your favorite part, Kelly?
Yes, I had similar ones. I think I crossed over on one or two there with you, but I want to talk about a theme that I see here in our podcast, which is that celebrating our successes. And we talked about that on our confidence podcast, where CPR is celebrate. The first C in CPR for building confidence is to celebrate. And so that was definitely one. That wasn't one that we crossed over on, but I just want to say that I think we all do that in life, that we really accomplish things and we just don't give ourselves the pat on the back. So my number one thing you touched on that I can just go a little deeper on was process. That old saying, it's not the destination, it's the journey. I think Mel really has that down, and said that he does enjoy the process. So I loved that too. And the one that I found probably most connected me to the interview was his approach to his mental health, because we'll talk about it in future episodes, we're even going to try to do a couple at least on anxiety and mental health, that we have a lot of athletes have a lot of anxiety and we don't talk about it. Just recently, Allison Schmidt and Michael Phelps have come out and said they had anxiety and depression. And I've suffered mostly with anxiety, and the mental health that he really takes care of. He said, he had a traumatic childhood and that he has gone to therapy from a young age. And I think that that's really very healthy. I've certainly been, to therapists at times in my life when I needed it, but I think his practice of yoga really spoke to me. I've gotten into yoga recently and a lot of meditation, and my anxiety is so much better once I do yoga and meditation. And the favorite part for me was creating space, giving that quiet time to have some space in your head, he said, so you can create. And so those were my favorite parts, but there was a lot there. It was just every time I would catch something that I was listening to, then I would miss the next part and I would literally have to go back and listen again, because it was so, once I recorded it on that road trip, then I listened to it several times and I just kept finding something new. So anything else from you?
Yeah, I love the, now that you're mentioning it, the creating space. That's a really important message for me, because I tend to be very, very busy and just go from one thing to the next. And his discussion of being able to be creative because he created space is really good, because if you're just doing all the time, then you're not, then you don't have the quietness that you need to make new things. And I don't really think of myself as a creative person. That's probably why, because I just put my head down and I stay busy. So I love that idea that I've said for years, that exercise gives you time. And I think relaxation gives you time too. It gives you, you spend time relaxing, creating space, as he put it, however you do it, through meditation or yoga or just being quiet. And it actually gives back. It pays you back. It's not a waste. And so I love that. He really seems to be very self-aware. Great interview.
Yes. And as we usually wind up our shows, Maria, we won't tell a story because we're going to run out of time here, but do you have one practice or we can trade practices of what you do to kind of get yourself into a really good space?
Yeah, I pray every morning. I spend 20 or 30 minutes. I read a Bible passage, and then I pray, and that starts my day off great. It gives me, makes me feel just terrific. What about you, Kelly?
Yes, in the same way, it's meditation. I have just prioritized that, 20 minutes. I actually went out and got certified in transcendental meditation. I watched Russell Brand is one of my favorite guys that's overcome, a heroin addiction, and he's a great comic, and he does transcendental meditation, and then Jerry Seinfeld does it, and a lot of these top performers. I'm like, there's got to be something to this. So I went and did the whole training, which I don't think people have to do at all. Now that I've done it, it's, certainly there's a group out there that would benefit from that, but I don't think people need to do the official to get the benefits. So yes, I have, a very set morning routine where I wake up, and then, as soon as I am kind of upright, I get into I have this beautiful little corner of my room with a little nice chair that's good enough to meditate in. And I put my noise canceling headphones on. I don't look at my phone. And then I do my 20 minutes of meditation before I get out in the world. And if I don't do that, I don't have as good of a day. And my anxiety is much lower when I do that. So that's
do you feel really peaceful after you do that?
I feel really peaceful after I do it, and creative. And I get a lot of my best creations at that time, because I am a creative. I mean, that is my thing. I am a creative person. So
that's great.
All right. Well, so in wrapping up today's show, we are going to close with our quote of the week on innovation to honor Mel Stewart, who we are calling the Innovator. So enjoy the quote of the week.
Now it's time for our quote of the week. This one from Clayton M. Christensen. Innovation will get traction only if it helps people get something they're already doing in their lives done better.
We are so grateful that you spent this time with us today, and we hope that you heard something that inspired, motivated, and educated you. Please see below for the copy of show notes or any links or important information referenced here. I'm signing off for myself and champion co-host Kelly Pallas. We hope you'll join us again soon, and we know you can be a champion. Thank you for listening.
You've been listening to the Champions Mojo podcast, designed to make you feel inspired, motivated, and educated. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and Google Play. Also visit championsmojo.com to learn more.